At one point, the subject of today's video looked like he'd have to quit football forever. He had suffered a severe neck injury in practice, and many believed that he would never get back to his original form, or that he'd be limited at the game of football for the rest of his life at best. The guy we need to talk about is Laiatu Latu. He was taken with the 15th overall pick in the first round by the Colts this year, and after a record-breaking career at UCLA, a huge high school run, and insane perseverance with his neck injury, he is now one of the top young edge rushers in the NFL and will look to have a bright future in Indianapolis. In today's video though, we're going to talk about who this guy is. We're going to talk about his insane recruiting story, how he overcame a nearly life-changing neck injury, and how he also became a first-round pick in his fit with the Colts. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Laiatu Latu. So going back in time, Laiatu Latu was born on the last day of the year 2000 in the city of Sacramento, California. He ended up growing up with 3 other siblings, and he was always from an athletic household. Ethnically, he came from a Polynesian family who instilled very tough values in him from a very young age. He was taught to be a hard worker, proud of his lineage, and to do things the right way. This would especially have to happen after his father left the house when he was only 5 or 6 years old, and despite neither of his parents really being big-time athletes, Laiatu always was. He was an extremely skilled rugby player, winning 2 national championships while he was in high school. Since they both went undefeated and he was considered one of the best high school rugby players in the country, his high school rugby coach said, quote, "When Laiatu showed up as a freshman, he had hair down past his waist. He was a skinny kid and probably weighed 150 pounds as a freshman. He really didn't like getting hit, but of course, his best sport was always football, and that's the sport he chose to stick with." When he got to high school, he attended Jesuit High School in Carmichael, California, and he didn't see the varsity field as a freshman at all. This was because his high school coach, Marlon Blanton, said, quote, "He was really raw as a player. He had a good frame and was really strong, but didn't have any sort of technique down. His upside was that he was a hard worker and had a thirst for knowledge and to get better on the football field. He would never end up getting discouraged, would keep improving, and worked hard in drills and on the freshman squad. While he was still a raw sophomore in 2016, he was much better. He played more on the defense than he did on offense, only catching 1 pass for 4 yards as a sophomore, but had 19 tackles and 3 sacks in relief duty as a linebacker. He was fastly growing into his frame and getting better at football each and every day at a very incredible rate. By the time the offseason of his junior year had rolled around, he became one of Jesuit's most impressive players in the weight room and on the practice field. The game was starting to slow down for him, and he was really picking up on it. Coach Blanton said, quote, "You can't teach his size and his athleticism. He's very coachable, and his motor is always going. He's really turned into one of our leaders. He went all out in every drill and chased down starting running backs as though if it were a real game. This left an impact on the other players on the offense, and on the field in 2017, he would earn more snaps for himself, catching 4 passes for 45 yards and a touchdown on offense. On defense, he really started to shine, as he finished with 65 tackles, 17 TFLs, and 12 sacks at the linebacker position, as well as 2 interceptions. He also returned 6 kicks for 48 yards. Off the field, he was starting to get noticed, and he was named the Delta League Co-All-Purpose Player of the Year, and was also selected to the first team All-Metro by a local newspaper known as the Sacramento Bee. In terms of recruiting, Oregon State would be the first school to offer Laiatu a scholarship, and this would come during the 2017 high school football season. After the year was over, a couple more would happen. Cal offered, then Vanderbilt offered, then Nebraska offered, and then Stanford offered. But in February, his offer list would explode. The Alabama Crimson Tide would offer, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish would offer, and the Tennessee Volunteers would offer. Big-time schools were getting really interested, giving his extreme rate of growth and his really good frame at 6'5" and 225 pounds. Laiatu said, quote, "I'm super blessed and super honored that these colleges are looking at me. This is all the hard work paying off. It's emotional, I'm really thankful, and my family is helping me a lot." Eventually, Latu's senior year would come in 2018, and he was used more as a tight end on offense. He ended up catching 13 passes for 272 yards and no touchdowns. This was okay though, since on defense he dominated for Jesuit. In total, he logged 94 tackles, 29.5 TFLs, and 6 sacks, which was hard to do because he was double and even triple teamed pretty much every play. Weirdly enough, he was also the team's punter, punting the ball 16 times for an average of 30 yards with 2 coffin corner punts. He also ran a kickback 52 yards. His coach said, quote, "There were a couple of times he hit people so hard we didn't know if the kid would get up, and to be quite honest with you, a lot of people didn't want to tackle him. So there were a lot of people kind of tripping on the grass before they got to him so they wouldn't have to deal with his hits." By the end of his senior season in 2018, Laiatu would make up his mind and knew where he wanted to go. The University of Washington is where he wanted to go, and he would become a Husky. He committed just a few days after getting the offer, and he made the Polynesian Bowl as one of the top Polynesian football recruits in the country. He didn't really do all that well despite how good he was. As his senior year, the team went 7-6 and made the conference semifinals. When he graduated from Jesuit, he was considered a 4-star recruit in the class of 2019. He would decide to not enroll early in June, but then was in time for summer camp, and many were excited for what Latu could do. When Latu would arrive at Washington, he got a ton of hype. Washington head coach Chris Peterson was immediately impressed with his ability and said, quote, "He impressed us from day one, and just kind of his whole mentality, how he works and how he competes. He's got a great vibe for him for a young guy." He ended up growing up to 265 pounds in the weight room, and he kept that same drive to learn and to get better, and that would continue on from high school. In his first year in 2019, he didn't really have to sit and learn. He ended up playing in relief duty in 12 games for the Huskies, logging 16 tackles and 1.5 TFL. There was a lot of hope that he would develop even further and help out Washington a lot. Since head coach Chris Peterson was retiring, they would end up elevating defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake to head coach, and this would come after an 8-5 season in 2019. But 2020 was not easy for Washington. For a lot of reasons, it went absolutely disastrously. But another reason it was bad was because Laiatu actually suffered a horrible injury. This was the neck injury I was referring to in the intro, as he suffered a severe hit to the neck during one of their fall practices, and it forced him out for the entirety of the year. He ended up getting neck surgery in 2021 to finish the issue, but Washington's team doctors didn't think he was healed enough to play for them in 2021. Some even thought he'd never play football again, and no one would have really blamed him if he decided to hang up the cleats, move on in life, and just heal. Coach Lake said, quote, "We exhausted every professional we could think of to make sure this was the proper decision. It was a tough decision to make for sure, but it's for the safety of our players first and foremost, and we never want to put anybody in danger, and we don't want him to not be able to use his extremities for the rest of his life." After that, Laiatu would spend the entire offseason looking for second opinions from other doctors and such, and even looked to see if another school would let him play instead of Washington. Finally, one of his position coaches had him meet with a doctor by the name of Robert Watkins. This was in the state of California, and he would end up clearing Laiatu to play football. That coach was then hired by the UCLA Bruins, so Laiatu went under the transfer portal and then committed to Chip Kelly and the Bruins in 2022. He was considered a 3-star transfer, but the situation surrounding his health and the fact that Washington essentially forced him into retirement made it so he wasn't really ranked that high, and no one really thought much of him. Most people expected him not to ever play again, and if so, it'd just be a feel-good story where maybe he makes a tackle or two. Well, that's not what would happen, as Laiatu instantly made an impact at UCLA, where he moved from linebacker to the defensive line full-time. He had a career-high 3 sacks against Colorado in 2022, earning him Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week honors, and this would end his season with 10.5 sacks in all 13 of UCLA's games. In total for the season, he finished with 36 tackles, 12.5 TFLs, and 3 forced fumbles. He was named one of the contenders for Comeback Player of the Year alongside Michael Penix Jr. and Mohamed Ibrahim. He started all 13 games for UCLA in 2023 and actually would lead the nation in tackles for loss with a 1.8 average per game and was 4th in sacks per game, averaging just over 1. His total of 13 sacks was the highest of any player in the conference, and he finished the year with 49 tackles, 21.5 TFLs, as well as 2 picks for 46 yards. He also forced 2 fumbles and had 2 pass deflections, and after the year, he got plenty of attention as he became UCLA's first ever Lombardi Trophy winner and was actually consensus All-American and the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. He also got respect as a Polynesian, winning Polynesian Player of the Year, and after the season was over, Laiatu declared for the 2024 NFL Draft. I'm not sure how much eligibility he had left, but he attended the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, and actually did pretty well. He ran a 4.640 in the Combine, and then he was considered to be a top 10 pick. I saw him as high as number 8 in the draft to the Atlanta Falcons, but he would end up slipping, and Chris Ballard and the Indianapolis Colts would get Latu with the 15th overall pick in the first round. Well, at the time, I was somewhat disappointed as I wanted them to get Dallas Turner instead. Laiatu is still a really good pick, and he was honestly undervalued. And honestly, they did get a little bit of a steal there because he was supposed to go in the top 10. In terms of how he'll do at the Colts, well, he has a lot of traits that NFL teams are going to love. That drive to get better is something the Colts immediately identified, and they need a guy to get after players like CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence in the division. While some may be worried about the injury, it doesn't seem to have bothered him. The neck injury did keep him out for 2 years of college football, but it ended up being more of a positive than a negative because he fought so hard to stay in the game, and it showed his extreme determination. The AFC South is one of the youngest divisions in football when it comes to quarterbacks, as they have CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Trevor Lawrence, and Anthony Richardson. Those guys should be around for a decent amount of time, so the Colts will need a good pass rusher like Laiatu to make an impact on defense and try to compete for those division titles. He probably won't get a chance to play full-time. He probably won't get a chance to be an all-downs pass rusher, but will be more of a situational type player who will get in the mix and hopefully show a ton of flash. Ultimately, he should end up being a Jalen Phillips or a Greg Rousseau type player, as a guy who's consistent and considered one of the best young pass rushers in the league because of his freak physicality and tenacity. But honestly, his story is even more crazy. But I think he'll have a great career in Indianapolis, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But what do you guys think? If you're a Colts, Washington, or UCLA fan, what do you think of Latu, and what other rookie or player should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.